Hello and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to America is in the Heart, a Personal History by Carlos Bulosan. Part 4, Chapter 38. I felt that I was nearing the end, and every day created a havoc in me. I wanted to do something, but I did not know where to begin. I had a vague desire to write. My mind was teeming with ideas, but I was not sure of myself. I yearned to know someone who was a successful writer, but the men around me were violent and crude. I needed some kind of order to guide me in the confusion that reigned over my life. I had only one escape, the Los Angeles Public Library. I planned to read 10,000 books on all subjects, but reading only made me live the acute pain of the past. When I came upon a scene that recalled my own experiences, I could not go on. But mostly I felt that other writers lied about life, that they were afraid to depict it as it really was in their environment. I returned to the writers of my time for strength, and I found Young-hil Kang, a Korean who had immigrated to the United States as a boy and worked his way up until he had become a professor at an American university. His autobiography, The Grass Roof, gave me an enlightening insight into the history of the Korean revolutionary movement. But it was his indomitable courage that rekindled in me a fire of hope. Why could not I succeed as Young-hil Kang had? He had come from a family of scholars and had gone to an American university. But was he not an Oriental like myself? Was there an Oriental without education who had become a writer in America? If there was one, maybe I could do it too. I ransacked the library, read biographies, omnivorously tried to study other languages. Then I came upon the very man, Yone Noguchi, a Japanese houseboy in the home of Joaquin Miller, the poet, who became the first poet of his race to write in the English language. Here at last was an ideal. Noguchi led me to other writers, Louis Adamic, Carey McWilliams, and John Fante. Adamic, because of his phenomenal success, overshadowed the others. But McWilliams' interest in the agricultural workers in California, including some 35,000 Filipinos, eventually drove him into the progressive movement, where we met and worked for civil liberties for the Filipinos and other minorities. On the other hand, Fante's obscure background and racial origin aroused in me a sense of kinship. I considered his imperturbability as merely a defense against an alien world. For his Italian pride and prejudice were similar to my Filipino pride and prejudice. But at the same time, I feared that because he lacked a positive intellectual weapon with which to cope with his environment, he might eventually lose the vigor of his peasant heritage. These, then, were the writers who acted as my intellectual guides through the swamp of a culture based on property. Now, I had the urge to write about my experiences, but still lacked the intellectual preparation to undertake such a tremendous task. One day, I met an American poet in the Los Angeles Public Library. Ronald Patterson invited me to his little room, and in a corner, piled to the ceiling, were magazines of all sorts. New Masses, Partisan Review, The New Republic, Left Front, Dynamo, Anvil, and other leftist publications, many of which sprung up and died in that one decade. I took some copies of the magazines with me. Here was something that intrigued me. Here was a new pattern of ideas. I looked back to the abortive, the new tide, and its full significance came to me. I asked my brother to read every magazine as fast as I could get them from Ronald, and when Jose came to our apartment, I asked him to read them too. Although the defeat of Republican Spain and the rise of Hitler were reflected in these publications, the magazines died with the setback of democratic forces all over the world. The course of international politics was changed, and new social ideas emerged and affected the literary movements in all countries. One evening, Ronald came to our apartment with a young Jewish girl. They took me to a meeting on Spring Street where, to my surprise, I met a girl who claimed she was Dora Travers' sister. The audience was composed of many nationalities. Current issues were discussed passionately, but every argument was directed toward one purpose: the unification of the minority so that they might work effectively with the progressive organizations and the trade unions toward a national program of peace and democracy. I felt that Filipinos could participate in this program. I said so to Ronald, and he referred me to a certain Ana Dozier, who in turn referred me to a Filipino in Boyle Heights. It seemed a great opportunity to rally Filipinos toward unity behind a vast democratic program. I asked Jose to go with me to Boyle Heights, hoping it would help him regain his early enthusiasm. He was no longer sure of his decisions, but I took a chance because I felt that if he had the making of a good labor leader, he should also have an instinctual direction for sound politics. I found the Filipino working in a restaurant on Brooklyn Avenue, a wizened little fellow who could hardly speak English. It was very difficult to converse with him. I tried some of the principal Philippine dialects, but he only knew his obscure island patios. "Yes, comrades," he said in effect. "I'm the first Filipino communist in Los Angeles. That is why the party refers to me when a Filipino wants to join us. Are you ready to sign up?" I was surprised. I had thought that he would explain the circumstances. Was he not referred to us by the Communist Party? Had I not expected to sign up with the organization? But if it was the only way by which I could get the support of organized groups in Southern California, I would do just that without considering the consequences. "I didn't come to join the party," I said apologetically. "I mentioned the difficult situation of our people in the state at a meeting the other day, and I was referred to you. I am in favor of unity. Perhaps we could have a statewide conference somewhere and plan a strategy." "First," he said, "you got to join the party. You can't plan intelligently without party direction. I tell you, comrades, you got to work with me as communists." "There must be some other way," Jose interposed. "There is no way other than the party," he said with finality. I asked him to give us more time and left. "There is something in what he said," I told Jose. "I don't know," he said. I wanted Jose to reconsider the proposal of the Filipino communist because I could have his confidence and he could have mine. I took up the matter with my brother. "We are familiar with Filipino problems," he explained, "but we must sound out their sentiments and feelings. Would they like to work under the direction of the Communist Party? It was a logical question, but I said, they wouldn't have to know it. The truth always comes out, Jose said. Perhaps the formation of a separate Filipino unit of the party is the answer, I said. I understand that there are several members in California. Why couldn't we put these members in a group of our own? It seems logical, Jose argued, but there must be a broader, more democratic, all-inclusive organization around which we could rally our forces. We must have a mass meeting next Sunday, my brother said. I prepared a leaflet and distributed copies to the Filipinos in the county. When Sunday came, a crowd gathered in the workers' hall on Main Street. Jose presided and I acted as secretary. The meeting was very simple and orderly. How come we Filipinos in California can't buy or lease real estate? A man asked. Why are we denied civil service jobs? Asked another. Why can't we marry women of the Caucasian race? And why are we not allowed to marry in this state? Why can't we practice law? Why are we denied the right of becoming naturalized American citizens? Why are we discriminated against in relief agencies? Why are we denied better housing conditions? Why can't we stop the police from handling us like criminals? Why are we denied recreational facilities in public parks and other such places? 10 important points. A broad generalization of our difficulties in California. It was comforting to know that these men too were stirred by the social strangulation of our people. But it was our plan to listen to the community, not to propose a program of action. The meeting was only a sampling of ideas, although, I found out later, it was also the beginning of a statewide campaign for the recognition of Filipino rights and privileges. Still, Jose and I could not agree. My brother suggested that we take separate trips along the coast. I was reluctant to pursue this suggestion, but it was my opportunity to get away from my brother for a while, because I was oppressed by the drudgery of his everyday life. Perhaps my return to the land and working people would give me a better understanding of our problems. I had not seen the familiar California coast for 2 years, and perhaps I had lost my perspective. Historic events had taken place while I was in the hospital, and one of the most significant was the emergence of the CIO. Several of its locals were dominated by Filipino cannery and agricultural workers. I was about to leave when the Filipino communist and Ana Dossier came to our apartment. You can't establish a separate Filipino unit of the party, she said. Why? It is a divisionist tactic. It is complete disobedience of the party's rules, the Filipino said. Every action regarding the party must come from me. But I'm not a member, I countered. Anna was hesitant. Then she said, nevertheless, the party is a democratic organization, the Filipino said. I didn't say it was undemocratic, I answered. And if it's communism our countrymen want, let them have it. I think that is democracy. You talk like an intellectual, Anna said. You know well enough that I have washed dishes for a living, I said. You know well enough that I have never made any pretensions to intellectualism. I don't trust him, the Filipino said to Anna as he turned to leave the apartment. I was naive. I wanted to be sure that communism was what Filipinos needed. I felt somehow that I needed it too. What was the nemesis of communism? Was it Trotskyism? Whatever it was that seemed relevant to the needs of the Filipinos in California, I knew that I must assimilate it. I left for the north in confusion. I knew that I would battle with myself for a decision. I rode in the bus and watched familiar scenes that evoked poetry in me. When was it that I had first seen this broad land? I trembled with joy, passing the familiar scenes. It was where I belonged, here in the color of green, the bitter taste of lemon peels, the yellow of ripe peas, in the pleasure, the beauty, the fragrance. Chapter 39. I stopped in San Fernando, a citrus town 25 miles north of Los Angeles. I walked to a big Filipino agricultural laborers camp in the center of a wide lemon farm. It was Sunday and there was a light rain in the sky. I found the lemon pickers crowded in a large garage where they were playing cards and washing clothes. I asked one of the men where I could find the leader of the crew. I was courteously guided to a little house under 2 tall eucalyptus trees. I knocked softly on the door, and a young Filipino woman opened it. I said that I would like to see her husband, but she answered that he had gone to town. She invited me into the house. I could wait for her husband. I knew from the way she spoke English that she was an educated woman. "That is my husband," she said, pointing to a picture of a man about 45 on the table. "I met him in Manila when I was going to college there. He was in the Philippines for 10 months. I found out later that he went there to look for a wife." "I have seen your husband around," I said, "but I don't know him. I understand that he has been managing this camp for 15 years. "Yes," she said, "but I have been here only 2 years. I went to Stanford University for 3 years, then came here for good. I can't use my education." She stared at me and said, "The Pinoys can't use their education either. That is why Pinoys have only one objective: to marry someone with economic security. But the parents are partly to blame. They teach their daughters to be greedy. So Pinoys in general are arrogant and stupid and lacking in humor." I nodded silently. "I didn't get your name," she said. I told her. "Don't you write for the Filipino press?" she asked. "Now and then," I said. "I'm just learning. I like your poems," she said finally. A car came into the yard. She went to the door and opened it. It was her husband. He climbed up the stairs and stomped onto the porch, shouting at the children there. Then he burst into the house with his arms full of packages. I jumped to my feet to help him, introducing myself. He acknowledged the introduction with a swift jerk of his head, as though he had heard of me somewhere. When we had piled the packages on a table, he invited me outside. We sat on the porch steps, throwing pebbles into the tall grass. He talked easily, though with visible restraint. I could see that he had been lonely, that the apparent happiness of his marriage could not make him forget the loneliness which had shadowed him during his 15 years in this lemon grove. "When I first came to this camp," he said, "these lemon trees were only a foot high. The land on the west side of my camp was still a desert. I went to the town and recruited Mexican laborers. Afterward, I went to Los Angeles and carted off Filipinos who had just arrived from the sugar plantations of Hawaii and from the peasant country of the Philippines." He looked affectionately toward the lemon groves east of the camp, then at the orange groves on the west. "I have made this valley fruitful and famous," he said quietly. "Some 10 years ago, I wanted to go into farming myself. So close I was to the soil, so familiar with the touch of clay and loam. But I found that I couldn't buy land in California. I had served in the United States Navy in World War I, so I thought I had the privilege. But after the war, I was on the ocean most of the time because I didn't resign when the armistice was signed. I didn't know that 3 years after the armistice, I could no longer file my citizenship papers. I could no longer become an American citizen. I wanted to become an American citizen for many reasons. But at that time, my most urgent desire was to buy a piece of land so that I could farm. I guess I'm a sucker for the land. He had the gentleness and the passion of my father when he spoke about the land. Perhaps he had come from the peasantry in the Philippines. Perhaps he had come from the peasantry in the Philippines. I also felt attached to the land, but it was now a different attachment. In the years long gone, it was merely a desire to possess a plot of earth and to draw nourishment from it. But now this desire to possess, after long years of flight and disease and want, had become an encompassing desire to belong to the land, perhaps to the whole world. I felt this way when I talked to him. It was a discovery. I found myself in him, in the strange melody of his attachment to the land that did not belong to him, in his almost mystical belief in the fertility of the earth. I talked for a while to some of the laborers, and then walked to the dirt road that led to town. I had not gone very far when I heard a car approaching from behind. I stopped and waited. The car came slowly and stopped. The woman at the camp called me. I jumped in, sure now that I could catch the first bus to Bakersfield. I was wordless with gratitude. I had cultivated silence early in life, and there were times when I felt I would burst into tears if I spoke. "Come back to see us again," she said at the bus station. "Come back next year, maybe the year after. Come back, Mr. Bulosan." I boarded the bus and left San Fernando. But in the night, passing through blooming orange groves, I could hear the woman's lonely voice. "Come back, Mr. Bulosan." It was the first time that anyone had addressed me that way. I arrived in Bakersfield and walked from pool rooms to gambling houses. The season for picking grapes was still far off. The vines were just pruned. There was no work for the cold months of winter. From the gambling houses, I went to the whorehouses, hoping to find someone I knew. There were no other places where Filipinos could go. I sat in the living room and watched lonely Filipinos paw at the semi-nude girls. I felt angry and lost. Where in this wide country could I go? I felt the way other Filipinos felt. I rushed out and cursed the cold night. I discovered that 3 Filipino farm labor contractors controlled the grape industry. Nearly 3,000 Filipino workers depended on them. They lived in crowded bunkhouses operated by these men. It was exploitation everywhere, even among ourselves. It was the same thing I had known years before. I wanted to see one of the contractors. I was introduced to Kabao, who had nearly 800 Filipinos under him. He was younger than most contractors, but I was skeptical. He drove me to his ranch. His house was large and gaudy. I saw a college diploma on the wall above his writing desk. I was looking at it when a car drove into the yard. Kabao rushed to the window and looked out. "My wife," he said. She burst into the house and came to the study with a bottle of whiskey. I was shocked when I saw her face. Where had I seen her before? I stumbled to my feet when Kabao introduced me to her, but she did not stay long. I heard her drive out of the yard. Then I remembered where I had seen her. I looked at Cabao sadly. "I'm sure you have seen my wife before," he said apologetically. "Everybody knows what she was before I married her. She worked in every important town in California. That is why everybody knows her. She followed the seasons, the way Filipinos follow the crops." I wanted to find out why he married her. He had almost everything he wanted. He had had a good education. "I saw your wife once some years ago," I said carefully, "but I didn't mean to ask you about her life history." "It's all right," he said. "When I talk about it, I feel free. Do you think it's money she wants? I give her enough, but she still is eager for the attention of men. I guess they are all the same." "Why did you marry her?" I asked. "She was young when I saw her in Watsonville," he said. "I was young too. I had gone there to work for the summer because I wanted to earn enough money to pay my college fees that year. I was taking sociology at the University of California. I took her with me and worked for her. There were years of desperation, but when I came here and made a little money, I bought this house for her. I thought she would settle down. I was wrong. Do you know where she is going tonight?" I did not want to know, but I could guess. I got up and started moving to the door. "I'll drive you to town," Cabao said. At the station, when Cabao had left, I discovered that he had put some money in my coat pocket. I took the bus and sat silently in a corner. I was on my way north again. Familiar towns. But I could not erase Cabao from my mind. I recalled his gentle, educated voice, his delicate hands. There was something lost and futile, something utterly defeated in him. "It's all right for me to suffer," I said to myself. "I'm stronger than he is. He has no right to suffer." I arrived in Stockton during a strike. Filipino asparagus workers were in the midst of a general walkout. A long parade was moving down El Dorado Street, but the strikers were orderly and quiet. I stood on a corner, reading the pennants and placards carried by some of the men. I noticed that all the stores and other buildings were closed on either side of the street. Even the gambling houses and liquor stores were closed. I saw Claro leading a section of strikers. He was boldly carrying a sign which said, "Paisanos, don't patronize Jap stores. It means hunger." His chin was up, his face animated. There was a grin in his mouth. Suddenly, I felt an urge in me to run to him. When was it that I first saw him? It seemed so long ago. I shouted to him and pointed to the sign. He looked in my direction but did not recognize me. I ran to him and shouted into his ear. "Don't you remember me?" For a moment he stopped, his eyes wandering wildly into the past. And then he flung his arms about me. There was genuine affection in his voice. The gesture of Claro, similar to the moving salutation of the French, was to spread to the members of our circle, to the Filipinos in the labor and progressive movements. It was to become a sign of affinity and affection. "You have changed, Carlos," he said. I ignored him, but I said, "I don't understand some of your placards. I thought this was a general walkout of asparagus workers." "Yes, it is," he shouted with anger. "But a Japanese woman is breaking it. She is supplying laborers." He walked on, looking from side to side, shouting greetings to friends, watching from doorways. When he saw a Japanese face, he became furious. Where had I met a similar character? Was it in Gorky's Decadence? In this novel, in one of the crowded streets, a revolutionist was walking with a surging crowd, anonymously. There was a powerful secret in his heart, and as he moved with the crowd, remembering comrades who had fallen and thinking of the promise of the future, his eyes glowed with happiness and his whole face became animated with sudden joy. I tugged at his sleeve. Could I tell him that I had come back to fight? Would he remember that he had sent me away long ago but advised me to return when I was ready to fight for our people? Would he remember that autumn day when I ate hungrily in his restaurant? This strike means more than dollars and cents in the asparagus fields, Claro said. This very day, the trade union movement and other progressive groups in Manila are demanding that the government boycott Japanese products. But it is deeper than you think. Tons and tons of scrap iron are going to Japan from the United States. They are made into bombs that are being dropped upon the peaceful Chinese people. I thought you didn't like the Chinese people, I said. There are good and bad men in every people, he said. For instance, I didn't like the Chinese vice lords in Stockton. I still don't like them, but they are cooperating in this strike. What do you mean? I asked. They have closed all their gambling houses. Do you see what this means? The Pinoys will keep their money and spend it only on food. The strike will last longer and the farmers will lose $2 million this season. Of course, the Chinese will also lose, but they figure that will win in the end. There is no sense to it, I said. If you win from one side, you lose to the other. Is there no way of winning from both sides? Isn't there? Claro. The parade moved eastward to Main Street and into the huge auditorium where local leaders were assembled to address the strikers. The UCAPAWA is now in power in the agricultural areas of the coast, Claro said. But we have a strong independent union here. I went to the back room and sent a dispatch to a labor paper in San Francisco about the strike. A representative from the Philippine government in Washington went to the rostrum and offered his support. This man was a spectacular figure in Filipino life. A labor commissioner in Hawaii. As a young man, he was also a writer and an editor. He was multilingual. He was a leader for the common man, and he tried in his brief career among Filipinos in California to bring their predicament to the attention of the home government. Unfortunately, he died before he could accomplish his mission. Chapter 40. After the meeting, I found Percy Toribio, the secretary-treasurer of the striking union. He was also editor of the union's organ. He was young and unsure of himself, a graduate of the University of Washington and a foreign correspondent for one of the weeklies in Manila. I'm more interested in writing, he confided. I started a novel some years ago upon the insistence of my professor, but it is still unfinished. Family life and labor problems. There was something about the way he talked that disturbed me. I was skeptical, remembering other college-bred Filipino leaders, but I envied Toribio's education and writing ability. I read some of your stories in the pages of Graphic, I said. I liked some of them, especially those pieces about cannery workers in Alaska. I haven't written a story since I left the university, he said sadly. I said, suddenly changing the subject. Have you thought of affiliating your organization with either the CIO or the AFL? He leaped to his feet. No! He shouted emphatically. Suddenly, he said, that is not what I mean. If the members wanted to affiliate with the big organizations, it's probable they would join with the AFL. But the CIO seems more democratic, I said. Besides, it has some of its most militant organizers in this valley. I don't think it is feasible, he said impulsively. The farmers might think we were a bunch of radicals. It doesn't work here. I began to boil with anger. Are you afraid of losing your job? I said coldly. I wish you hadn't said that, Carl! He turned and walked silently away. I knew it was impossible to talk with him. I had never trusted college-bred leaders because, in my experience, when the crucial moment came, they were not to be found. I walked down El Dorado Street thinking of Toribio. I felt that if I met him again, he would be against me. Was there no common ground? He was a representative of the Filipino intelligentsia, while I represented the peasants and workers. I was also a revolutionist. And because of my firm conviction that Filipino workers should be educated politically in order to contribute effectively to the general upsurge of democratic forces in the United States, Toribio and I would oppose each other if we met again. I was eating in a restaurant when Claro came in with a morning paper. He spread it in front of me, his face beaming. I read the headline, Filipino Communist Leads Strike. Swiftly, I read the article, filled with premonition. It did not mention my name, but the description was almost exact. Who could have done it? Jose, perhaps? Perhaps the Filipino communist in Boyle Heights? I could not understand it. Claro was smiling mysteriously. Why didn't you tell me, comrade? He said, raising a clenched fist. I could have saved you all this trouble. You are greatly mistaken, I protested. It's all right to be cautious, he whispered. I understand your position. How is it down there? Are we strong enough to start something big? I saw Steve Lasso come in hurriedly, a foreman for one of the big farmers. He was one of the first to withdraw from the fields. A folded copy of the morning paper was in his pocket. He looked very tired. You'd better leave this town right away, he said. They are looking for you. Claro interrupted. Let him stay, Steve! It's impractical, Steve argued. He will mess up everything if he stays. You must go at once, Carl! I walked to the back door. Claro's face darkened. There was grim determination in his eyes. He raised his hand in the communist salute. I'll be back, Claro, I said. I'll drive you out of town, Steve said. The patrolmen are watching the highways, but we will take a chance. We ran to Steve's car and started driving on the highway to Oakland. What was happening to all of us? What was going on among Filipinos? Was everybody moving toward a faith strong enough to blast away the walls that imprisoned our life in America? I yearned to talk to Steve, but he was driving madly down the road. I would go back to Stockton after the strike and talk to Claro. Several miles out of town, near the hills, we saw the shiny motorcycles of patrolmen guarding the highway. They were searching every car. Steve told me to take off my coat and muss up my hair. He shoved a big cigar into my mouth and told me to light it. I lit it when the patrolmen stopped us. They looked at me suspiciously for a moment, opened the rumble seat, came back to the wheel to look at me again. Then they let us go. I sighed with relief. I don't like to run away, Steve, I said. But if it's for the good of the strike, I will go. It's better this way, he said. But I will be waiting for your return. You fooled them with your youthful looks. You must take good care of that face and those hands. Your youth is a weapon. Goodbye. I stopped the bus when it came to the bend of the road. I jumped on and settled myself comfortably. I was tired, and sleep came at once, with troubled dreams. In one dream, I saw my mother serving my brothers and sisters. When my father told her to eat, she answered that she was not hungry. But I knew that she was hungry because I had been with her all day. We had gone to the villages together selling salt and salted fish. We did not eat anything except a few stalks of young rice that we snatched from the fields. The dream shifted to another evening, and my mother was serving again. She would not eat. Then I knew why. There was not enough food in the house. She was starving herself so that her children would have something to eat. I knew now because I had been with her all day. I stopped eating and announced that I was feeling faint. My mother looked up at me and a flash of understanding crossed her face. I walked to the ladder and went out into the yard. It was a dark night and the coconut trees stood like ghosts among the grass houses. I climbed an acacia tree in the front yard and looked through a window into our house. I could see my brothers and sisters eating. Even my mother was eating now. I was happy then, seeing my mother eating and laughing too when one of my brothers told a joke. I looked up and prayed that my mother might live long under those skies. I awakened by my tears of remembrance. I looked out the window and saw the water shimmering with lights. San Francisco was glowing, and behind us, Oakland was fading. I could hear foghorns in the bay. They sounded like carabaos lost in a wide meadow. I felt like going to a land far away. Then I went to sleep again and dreamed about my father. I was up in the acacia tree again. I was watching my mother cooking a few kernels of corn. I could see them shining golden in the lamplight. There was a worried look in my mother's face. What was it? She came to the front window and called for me, looking up and down the twilight road. I did not answer. She returned to the kitchen. I climbed down the tree and started running away from our house. I wanted to run away from all that poverty. I did not want to because there was affection in our family, but I hated the aching misery. I did not know where to go now. I seemed to hear someone shouting to me in the coming darkness. "Run! Don't go back! Run!" I lifted my shirt and wiped the blinding tears out of my eyes. I ran swiftly in the dark. I was running away from love, from all that was good and true. I was afraid to know that we were poor. I could not bear to see my mother starving herself. Wait for me, star of night. Days and nights I walked until a policeman found me sleeping in the public market of a strange town. When I refused to reveal my name, he took me to the town jail. The chief of police, a kind young man, came into my cell with bananas. I ate some of them while he watched me. "You like them?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "You looked hungry, so I thought maybe you would like to try our bananas in this town. I raised them myself. Would you care to see the trees?" He lifted me off the bench and took me to the low window that overlooked the backyard of the Presidencia. There, in the wide yard, tall and fragrant and full of fruit, bananas stood under the sun like village girls on their way to church. "You planted them, sir?" I asked. "Sure," he said. "We have bananas too," I said. "My father and I are farmers. I wish you could see our banana grove and our coconuts." "Sir, that is something to see." "I would like to see your farm now," he said. "Let's go." He took my hand and went outside where an old Ford was waiting. He jumped behind the wheel and started the motor. "Where to, partner?" he asked. "Binalonan," I said. "Binalonan!" There was a sudden recognition in his face. He smiled at me and drove on. "I used to have a friend from your town. He became a maker of songs in America." I looked at him with great yearning. When he saw that I was curious, he patted my head as if I were his own son. "America is a land far away," he said. It was the first time I had heard about America. I was going back to my family from a town that seemed hundreds of miles away. When the man drove into our yard, my father came down and carried me lovingly into the house. "You mustn't run away again, Alos," he said. He took me to the kitchen where my brothers and sisters were waiting. My mother was spreading food on a low table, but when she saw me in my father's arms, she dropped the ladle in her hand and reached for me. "We have enough food now, son," she said. I sat on the floor and started to eat. Then suddenly I remembered the man who had driven me in his old car. I ran to the window and looked into the yard, but he was already gone. He who was so kind, gentle, and good. Would I see him again somewhere? Would I? Were all people from America like him? Were all people in America like him? "He's gone! He is gone!" I said, rushing to the ladder. I woke up when the man next to me shook me vigorously. "You were crying in your sleep," he said. "It was just a dream," I said apologetically. "We are in San Francisco now," he said, walking to the door of the bus and into the station's waiting room. I followed him slowly. Suddenly, it came to me. It was not a dream. It had actually happened to me when I was a little boy in Binalonan. It had come back to me in a dream because I had forgotten it. How could I forget one of the most significant events in my childhood? How could I have forgotten a tragedy that was to condition so much of my future life? Chapter 41. I returned to Los Angeles where I found Jose waiting for me. He had gone only as far north as San Jose. We prepared a form letter and sent copies to well-known Filipino labor leaders on the Pacific Coast. We invited them to a conference in Los Angeles with the idea of organizing a committee on which we could work together irrespective of affiliations. Ganzo, who had been publishing the Philippine Commonwealth Times, was the first to arrive. 3 delegates came from Seattle, 2 from Portland, 1 from San Francisco, 5 from Central California, and 1 from San Diego. There were 21 delegates when we finally assembled in the house of the Filipino Communist in Boyle Heights. I knew most of the delegates because some were members of our old group. The same men who had fought for unionism when it was still illegal to organize workers in California. But the unions had come to stay, and the progressive movement had come too. And some of the Filipinos were joining the ranks of the communists. All of us wanted to create a working committee from which we could form the nucleus of a broad organization for Filipinos on the Pacific Coast. I did not know that the Los Angeles delegation was controlled by 2 parvenues, Roman Rios and Javier Lacson, who came to the conference with a red-headed girl from New York. But the nucleus had already been formed in San Francisco, where Jose, Nick, and Conrado Torres met before they joined us in Los Angeles. When they arrived with the other delegates, I was sure that they would propose a plan for a broad organization, and I was not wrong. On the first day of the conference, the Committee for the Protection of Filipino Rights, CPFR, was created. I was new to 2 delegates from Seattle, Jose Lozano and Mark Dorion, who came with Torres to represent the state of Washington. These 2 were active in the labor movement in the North and officers of the UCAPAWA Local 7. They were to become the most active supporters of the progressive movement in the Northwest. On the second day of the conference, the CPFR took up as its major task the campaign for the right of Filipinos to become naturalized American citizens. The new organization had vitality and direction at a time when intelligent leadership among Filipinos was sorely needed. It became, in a way, the most effective weapon of the Filipinos on the West Coast. I had found something to occupy my time, for in the CPFR I had a channel through which I could release my creative energies. I wrote articles and special news items about our work in the organization. With the intermittent help of Jose, we published Ganzo's paper. It was the only publication interested in the struggle for a definite social security for Filipinos in the United States. But it lacked the strong financial support that publications of its kind required. My brother Macario, who was never idle for a moment, put up his own money when an issue was withheld by the printers due to unpaid bills. I believe my inclinations are toward conspiracy. I became restless working on the paper. There was not enough drama in it. I asked myself in moments of agitation what it was that made me react to violence with all my fury. Was violence the only force that could stir me intellectually? In my sick room, following the activities of the members of our committee, I became frantic and lonely. I wanted to live their lives, suffer their sufferings. Even when Representative Vito Marcantonio introduced a bill in Congress proposing Filipino citizenship, even then I looked out the window of my room like a prisoner on some isolated island. I knew, however, that the Marcantonio bill gave us a chance to campaign nationally. I kept in close touch with the branches of the CPFR, which had been established in every important city on the West Coast. I corresponded with the American Committee for the Protection of the Foreign-Born, an organization in New York whose program was similar to that of the CPFR. Thus, our work was centralized. Upon the approval of the Central Committee of the CPFR, I began speaking before American audiences in Southern California. The Hollywood Democratic Committee was very active. So much as I distrusted the middle class, I embarked upon this new phase of my life with great enthusiasm. Once, when I spoke in the meeting hall of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, where I discussed the predicament of the Filipinos in the United States, I met an American woman who invited me to her house. We rode in her car down Sunset Boulevard until we stopped in front of a white house. The rug in the living room was as white as the clouds in the skies of Mangusmana. When she went to the ice box, I bent over and felt the soft strands of white hair that were woven into the rug. How luxuriously this woman lived! Was this the reason that made me hate her class? Was my lack of comfort the mainspring of my dark fear? I sat on a chair deeply agitated. She sat down and we talked about the CPFR. I patiently traced its origin, how it had sprung from the need of Filipinos for a broad organization. It was when she was mixing drinks that the doorbell rang. She looked uncertainly at me, then at the door. Finally, she hurried me into the kitchen and ran to the front door. I heard a man come into the house, but I could not hear what they were talking about. I was burning with indignation. Was I right in my fear after all? Was there no way to cure this land? Why did she push me into hiding when a friend of hers came into the house? Was she ashamed because of my race? What was the real reason? I could not understand it. I did not notice the time. When she came to the kitchen again, the man had gone. I'll give a party for your organization in my house, she said. Will you be my guest? Yes, thank you, I said. Next week? I nodded. My personal pride was hurt, but I was working for something big. This I knew. Filipinos worked and lived in national terms so that when they were maligned, they thought their whole race was maligned. And so it was with me, with this slight difference. My deepening understanding of socialism was destroying my chauvinism. But it was strange that when I emerged from the house, I thought of the white rug in the living room with yearning. There was a comforting, delicious feeling in me. As I walked further from it, I was possessed by a strong desire to buy a rug like it someday. I had one important job to do, the campaign for the Marcantonio Bill. But the race haters in California were also busy lobbying against it, headed by a congressman with the backing of big farmers and allied interests. They fought the bill and killed it. And there were other groups against Filipinos. Liberty League of California, Daughters of the Golden West, Daughters of the American Revolution, and the Parent-Teacher Association. These, with the Associated Farmers of California as the sharp spearhead, were instrumental in killing every bill favorable to Filipinos in Congress and in the state legislature. They worked as one group to deprive Filipinos of the right to live as free men in a country founded upon this very principle. My brother's spirit was broken. His savings had gone into our campaign. One afternoon he came home sick and tired. He went to bed hoping to gather strength to go back to work the next day. In the morning, a man from his place of work came to our apartment. "You'd better come to work, Macario," he shouted to my brother, "if you want to keep your job." I was preparing some soup for Macario when I heard him moving about upstairs. I knew he would go. He was searching for his working shoes now. Was he thinking of me? Was he afraid for me if he had no job? Suddenly, I seized a butcher's knife from the table and rushed madly up the stairway. My brother saw me first, and he leapt for my arm before I could raise it. "No, Carlos!" he shouted, hanging on the arm with the butcher knife. "No! Let him alone!" "I'll kill you!" I shouted to the man. He ran into the other room. When my brother had taken the weapon from me, he went to the room where the man was hiding. "You must go now," I heard him say. "I didn't do anything to him." The man protested. "What is the matter with him? Is he crazy?" "Please go now," Macario said. I heard them go out together. I closed the door and burst into tears. Why hadn't I killed him? I heard Macario coming back to the house. He went to his room and lay weakly on the bed. I went to the door and peered through the little opening. His hands were neatly folded on his chest. I felt like a little boy whose God has been struck down by evil winds. I wanted to work now that my brother was ill, but I was too frail to do anything that demanded much physical exertion. Was there no one among our friends who had money to lend? But we were all in the same predicament. We were concerned beyond rescue. We were cornered beyond rescue, and the only escape was death. I walked in the streets at night, hoping to meet someone with money. Would I go back to the violence of the old days with Max and Julio? I felt a gun in my pocket, and the desire to kill for money seized my mind. Was not this weapon a symbol of my past? Max had killed a white man with it. I had smashed the head of a Japanese farmer with it. Maybe I could use it again. Why not? I ran down the street and stopped to look up at the state building. There was a light in Carrie McWilliams' office. I calmed down. I sat on the cement stairway. Maybe I could borrow money from him. I looked up again with anticipation. But when the light went out of his office, I could not face him. I got up quickly and ran home. I was climbing the cement stairway that went up to the court when I noticed that one of the houses was open. Stealthily, I went to the door and peered inside. I heard a woman taking a bath upstairs. On a portable radio, shining like a firefly, was a diamond ring. I slid inside the door and grabbed it. I ran outside and down the stairs into the street where the sudden warm wind calmed my nerves. I remembered a place that was a rendezvous of gamblers down the block. It was crowded with the outcasts of Temple Street. I stood patiently behind a lucky gambler. When he had counted his money, I showed him the diamond ring. His dull eyes sparkled. I sold the ring to him with the understanding that I would redeem it when I had the money to pay him back. I knew I could trust a gambler because I had been one of them. When I arrived at our apartment, I sent for a doctor to examine my brother. In the morning, I bought enough groceries to last him for 3 months, paid the rent, and gave the rest of the money to my brother. I knew that I had to go away for my own sake, because if I did not escape now, I would probably steal again. I had come to the end of the road. In spite of my reading and my association with educated people, I had only become more confused and desperate. One night, deep in meditation, I was aroused by my brother's sudden stillness. I was seized with panic. I switched on the lights. He was sleeping soundly. How old he had grown! My brother, who had never worked in the Philippines. I switched off the lights and went downstairs. Oh, my brother, who gave me light in the dark of night! I sat at the bare table in the kitchen and began piecing together the mosaic of our lives in America. Full of loneliness and love, I began to write.